perceive yourself to belong to the group of people who identify as women, move over to the side of the room. And then all the women move over here. Take a look to see who's in your group. Take a look to see who's in the other group. Move on back to the other side. If you perceive yourself to be an American, move over to this side, right? And then take a look who's in your group, the other group, and so on and so on. So the idea is to try to get them to understand the multiple identities that we have as individuals, and then you can have a group discussion around what did you notice? Were there any feelings that actually came up? You can process it that way. Yes?
So I wanted to mention what Jesus talked to us about several times today, which is the importance of training facilitators, because I've participated twice in privilege walks. The first time I did it, my professors really weren't trained, and so they didn't really tell us what we were going to do. They hauled us out into the hall. They started asking these questions. Before you knew it, certain people were crying. It was a bit of a mess, because some of the questions were along the lines of, let's see, what is the highest level of education of your parent? And then they would list out degrees. Have you ever been homeless? Things like that. So you learn a lot about the group of people that you're with, but the participants have to be kind of, yeah, in the same way that we would set our ground rules for dialogue, folks need to understand that they may be asked a question about their social identities and or background that they may or may not want to share. The one on privilege really makes the point, like there were several people that were way out in front because they had enjoyed so many different kinds of privileges, whereas there are other people that were still with their back up against the wall because they hadn't enjoyed any of those privileges. So it can be very effective, but the person who's facilitating has to know what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I have never done the privilege walk myself. I mean, I've seen it done.
Yeah.
For me, no one has been able to explain to me how to process something like that. And
Yeah.
actually, I wouldn't do it at the beginning of any kind of retreat or anything like that, right? I would, like in my multicultural education course, I wouldn't show the color of fear until week 10, after they understood unearned privilege, worldview, culture, and those kinds of things. Then they had the tools for actually watching the film, as tough as it is, and they would say, oh yeah, David is having a difficult time entering the worldview, so they had the words and the tools for understanding it. Otherwise, I've seen people who actually show that at the beginning of their multicultural education course, and they have explosions. Yes.
Just very quickly on the privilege walk type things sound similar. We did an on-course, we just made a line with lines going across and a dot in the middle. And if you have this, move your pencil up. If you have this, move it back one. And so it was a very private, individual thing, but you were still able to see privately. So you're not exposing yourself to others.
That's
Yeah,
great.
it was eye-opening.
The other thing was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just had a question about the previous slide that had the different exercises on it. In our resources, are there explanations of each one of those techniques?
I don't know sure whether body sculpting is up there, but
That's what I was curious about.
I'll describe body sculpting really quickly. It's a little bit more higher risk, so you want to be judicious about that, but it's pretty powerful too. You break students into small groups and then you give them a concept, privilege, unearned privilege, for example. And then you say, I want you to actually pull that concept apart. Tell me what are the different dimensions of this concept called privilege. And then once they've torn it apart, there's power, there's unawareness, there's, they come up with several things. Come together and put together a sculpture using your bodies that actually depicts the different dimensions of the concept, right? And then what they do is they come in and they, so also you have to give them instructions. Don't be pulling bodies apart, like, let me grab you by the arm over here. Talk to people, right? Be respectful of body space, right? So they'll end up coming and they'll put their space, their sculpture together, and then the rest of the group gets to critique the art, right? So what do we see here? I don't know, I see like anger. This over here looks like people don't want to learn, right? So man, it's a really powerful exercise because they're using their bodies and they understand different dimensions of sculpture. So, and a nutshell, that's what it is, but I can, Lisa can push me, and I can try to describe that a little bit more. Gordon Elford's contact hypothesis that in order for intergroup relations to be positive, you gotta have a common ground, common task, so that we're all working together to paint the school together as equal status contact, as opposed to white students come in and paint the school while people of color or whoever are looking on. That's not equal status contact. They plan together, they work on the task, and then they sanction by authority. Somebody says this is important, we will do that. This is the intergroup dialogue run along this particular model. Equal status contact, you have 10 African Americans talking to 10 whites, 2 co-facilitators representing each group. The program is sanctioned by the university, and then the task is to achieve higher levels of understanding. We're working together as a team to understand this concept a little bit better. Learning theory is also important here because it is this idea that you're going to support the students as they're working through their issues, but you're also going to challenge them. I just talked about, okay, you just said all whites are racist. You know, just put a percentage to that, right? You're challenging the students to what they said, but you're also supporting them. Okay, I understand what you're saying, right? So you want to support and challenge these individuals. Now, the learning edge is very, very critical too. Is that you want to push students along the way so that there is some level of what they call dissonance. As opposed to I'm at home and I'm watching, sitting in my lazy boy recliner watching TV. Not a lot of dissonance there, right? When you're in these dialogues, there's going to be some dissonance, there's going to be some discomfort, and that's good. But up to a point, if you push them over the learning edge, then they're going to shut down on you. So where is the learning edge? It depends on you. I've been criticized for some of the training that I do. People say, well, you don't push whites far enough. You should really push them harder. Well, I'm going to push them about as far as I want to be pushed when I have to deal with sexism, for example. But I know there's a point in time where I'm going to shut down, right? If somebody's screaming in my face, I'm going to shut down. You want to take them up to the learning edge to make sure that they're growing and developing. Paulo Freire actually talked about, he was very concerned about working with illiterate peasants, and he was very much, he didn't want to indoctrinate them. And what he actually did is he would actually have them dialogue around stories. Yesterday, I think that we had the underwater sea diver have a dialogue so they could discover the concepts. And then more importantly, codification is you take some sort of symbol to represent a theoretical framework. The hula hoops that we did yesterday is social identity theory manifested in these hula hoops, right? And the students are not going to remember saliency. They're going to remember my hula hoop was way out here. So that whatever concept you have, you want to codify it so that actually they walk away through an exercise, a metaphor, a story is how you actually achieve that. Yesterday I talked about all these files that we have in our head. And this is what you're dealing with as dialogue facilitators. As a result of the dialogue, you're actually updating files. You know, like your story, I had never thought about that. Now I got a file that I got to think about what you said, right? And as well as other opinions that were actually shared. So you want to get the students to update those things. And, or schema theory just has to do with the idea that these ideas are highly organized in our head. They're not random. And I presented some schemas that are actually, we've identified that people have about different communities. Here's a heterosexual schema with respect to the LGBT community. So in reality, through dialogue, we're trying to get them to revise the schema in the way of greater complexity. And I mentioned yesterday that this particular schema, we decided that we weren't going to go after the whole thing. We actually decided we were going to go after 2 that were really preventing people from moving on. This idea that if we talk about gays, or if I meet a gay person, I'm going to turn into a gay person. And we decided to go heavily after that, and that helped a lot. The students were actually able to put their defenses down, and be able to deal with all these other things. white racial schema, colorblind, all these other kind of things that, through the process of dialogue, hopefully they will be revised in that in a different direction. One of the things to think about schemas is that when people realize that color blindness is not the way to go, this is the way they've thought for a long time, it's kind of scary to realize, you know what, I always thought that color blindness was good. So it's scary, like, it's like, okay, I used to step that way, but now you're telling me that that's not the way to go. So it's a little scary. Where do I go? This is where you want to be there, you want to provide information in order for them to not fall down. You don't want to say, change the schema, it gets revised, and you leave them hanging, right? You want to work with folks to actually give them ideas about where they might want to go next. And I was going to have you do some schemas. In fact, I'll pass these out, and that you can actually sit back with your facilitator and figure out, we're doing an LGBTIQ group, what would be the possible schema that we're dealing with, or you're going to do something on class, 4 people, for example, or socioeconomic class, what is the schema? Gender identity, in order for you as a facilitator to understand the process more as you actually go into dialogues. I think we've talked about some of these right here. The 4 corners exercise is, you tell the students, okay, on this corner are people who actually have a lot to say in class, to the students, right? So you're actively participated in class. In this corner over here are the students who only talk when they think it's important to jump in, but they don't talk a lot, but if they have a strong opinion, they'll do it. Over here are the quiet participants. You're learning a lot, but you just don't say a heck of a lot. And then on this corner, and I always forget corner number 4, but there's a different style over here. Put yourself in the corner that you represents the style that you use to actually speak. And the students go in and you process, why did you put yourself over here? Why did you put over here? So that during the dialogue, they keep in mind that there are different styles of communicating. Again, a tool for them to engage in the process of dialogue. And I already mentioned that you have to prepare them for that, and one way is to do the 4 corners of that.
Would the 4th one be like students who are just disengaged or don't care?
That could be, they could be one, yes.
You know, like
There's a
I
4th
have
one,
to
and I'm
be
blanking
here
it out
kind
right
of
now. It's something along those lines, and I always forget number 4, so I apologize, but it could be that. And I have that written up, Lisa, so.
All right.
If you decide to move in that direction, just shoot
Yeah.
me an email and I'll actually get it. Metaphors are very, very powerful. To have a discussion and say, okay, when I think about race relations, I think about the metaphor of the sun and the moon, so the sun and the earth, and it rains and they're interconnected, right? I'd like for everybody to think for a few minutes, what is your metaphor for the way that race relations are going on in this country? And then everybody comes up with a metaphor and then you share, and then you have a dialogue around these metaphors, right? But those are pretty powerful. So, one exercise to do that. You've got to be working together with your co-facilitator. Work out your issues outside of the group. We have had one case where the facilitator were not getting along, and it played out in the dialogue, so we had to intervene and work with them. It was a successful meeting, but if they had not gotten their issues worked out, I would have said, go ahead and step out and we will take over. Because you don't want that happening where you meet before each meeting to have a plan as to how the dialogue is going to go. But let's say that you come up with a perfect plan. It's about affirmative action, and then you're going to ask this question, you're going to ask that question. And then you ask a question, and the students start dialoguing about affirmative action, but it goes in a direction that you had thought about, but it's still on the topic. You're alone. They are having a dialogue. So you have a plan, but you don't necessarily say, okay, can we stop talking about that because we have a plan? We want to do it now. And let them dialogue. And then modeling. Modeling is, like I said, I apologize to the students. That's modeling. So you want to think about those kinds of things. Oh, just as an example of a first meeting agenda, we pay attention to the logistics. There's an attendance tag that represents who they are, and then you have a discussion about, so, tell us who you are and why did you put that, what symbol did you put and what does it mean to you, right? Again, getting them to bond on an interpersonal basis, the ground rules, the purpose of the dialogue, you have some icebreakers to get them to, understand each other, introductions, the active listening exercises. That's actually, that's a repeat of previous slide. Group closure, the last group, let's say you're meeting for 2 hours. You spend the first hour talking about final issues, what is it that you want to say about race in America for the first hour. And the last thing, say whatever you're gonna say, but we're gonna spend about about an hour doing that. The following hour, the second hour, you're closing the group down. And there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but you can ask these questions. Okay, I'd like for everybody to think about this. Is there hope for us solving some of these issues, or, you know, talk about something positive that you learned in this group, and so on and so on. But it's important to close the group down in a very positive way, very much like counseling groups actually do. I was gonna have you do dialogue practice, but we're out. We actually did that. Closing and thank you. Wow, I made it.
Okay, so, we have, Jesus, certificates are there, and we'll hand them out, and then Robin will ring through the first hour and get you a certificate. We're gonna make that up after we're done, and I'll send that to you via campus mail. There will be an evaluation that's coming, working with Swan on that, so please fill that out. I've emailed Jane Mishiro, in HR and let her know that we have 11 people, that's just fantastic, it's normally 5, who committed to the full program. And it was just our very good fortune that we are a diverse group. We're diverse in terms of faculty, staff, and managers, different length of college, race and ethnicity, age, you know, all sorts of different things. That's what we want. We want to do. Some of us are on the subcommittee, some of us not. Some of us may want to continue with this work, some of us not. That's okay. You can let me know that privately or, you know, by email, something like that. And let's just give Jesus one more round of applause.
So once we receive our certificate,
You're done.
thank you so much. It was-
Yeah.
it was great. It was really, really great.
Yeah.
Some of I don't remember the names of,
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Marsha.
That's some good.
Marsha.
Well, she left, she's a lady.
That's why.
Yeah,
How about Lisa? Lisa or?
right here. Yeah. Yeah, it's literally an introduction